This is the Week in Review, a recap of the major stories which shaped the landscape of St. Kitts and Nevis last week. Thanks for joining. I'm Michael Berridge. St. Kitts and Nevis government pushes ahead with National Addressing System. The Nevis Island Administration Ministry of Finance issues statement on fuel surge charge adjustment. 5 bills received reading in the National Assembly on Thursday. Suite of legislation passed in the National Assembly. St. Peter's to be restored to 24/7 water supply following key upgrades. Dr. Drew calls for climate justice and community-led solutions at Climate Mobility Forum in Germany. And TDC invests in leadership development. Those are the major stories, and now the details. As part of its ongoing commitment to developing strong, effective leaders across the company, TDC Human Resources Department hosted a comprehensive 3-day program from the 15th to 17th June 2026, the leadership training program under the theme Leading Through People, Practical Leadership Skills for Management. Designed to strengthen leadership capabilities at all levels of management, the workshop brought together supervisors, middle managers, and executive leaders in dedicated sessions tailored to their unique roles and responsibilities within the organization. The training sessions were facilitated by renowned regional business strategist and leadership consultant Ms. Dana Haynes Burke and were held at the TDC Training Room on 4th Street in Bastia. The training formed parts of TDC's broader commitment to employee development and organizational excellence, ensuring that leaders at every level are empowered to effectively guide their teams and contribute to the company's long-term strategic objectives. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis is pushing forward with plans for the National Addressing System, which will provide a critical upgrade to the current structure that has gaps including unmarked and in some cases unnamed streets. Sandra Davon, postal advisor, highlighted the importance of a proper addressing system, noting that it will support the modernization of the National Postal Code and enhance the efficiency of mail and package delivery services. She also stated that it will provide emergency responders with accurate directions, streamline global positioning system, and facilitate better urban and rural development planning. Government officials will be promoting public involvement in the street naming process while building community pride and national identity. A pilot application is being created to facilitate feedback in naming streets currently without one. While this process is underway, the government has secured grant funding for updated satellite imagery and a light detection and ranging flyover to assist with the mapping exercise. These incorporate remote sensing technologies to map and monitor terrain using highly detailed photos and airborne lasers that generate precise 3D topographical models. A sample of the collected information will be used for a pilot project that will allow real-world testing of the addressing system utilizing postal service delivery, emergency response, and GPS map services. This is the Week in Review. The following is a statement by the Nevis Island Administration Ministry of Finance. The release states, the recent escalation in the price of petroleum-related products on the world market continues to have a damaging effect on activities in the local economy, manifesting itself through price increases across all economic sectors. The volatility is due primarily to the ongoing tensions between the United States, Iran, and other Gulf states. The most notable effect is a drastic increase in the price of diesel, which has increased the cost of generating electricity at our locally owned Nevis Electricity Company Limited. In September 22, in response to a similar but less drastic fluctuation in the price of fuel, the Nevis Island Administration took the decision to cushion the effect on domestic consumers by subsidizing the fuel surcharge, thus shifting the burden of payment from the domestic consumers to the government. During the period of September 2022 to April 2026, the Nevis Island Administration has paid an amount of $28.9 million to NEVLEC as a subsidy for fuel surcharge on behalf of every household on Nevis. While it has always been the intention of the Nevis Island administration to provide relief and cushion the effect of price increases on our citizens, the continued full subsidizing of the fuel surcharge has become unmanageable and unsustainable, as it is imposing a heavy demand on the already limited resources of the Nevis Island administration. The NIA is aware that the board and management of NEVLEC have taken the decision to reinstate the partial fuel surge charge to domestic consumers. While we understand the difficulty that this will pose for our citizens, this decision was necessary to provide NEVLEC with the resources to continue to provide reliable electricity service to meet the demands of our island. We crave your understanding and encourage all to institute the necessary energy conservation measures aimed at reducing your consumption of electricity, ultimately restricting the amount of surcharge on your monthly electricity bill. The Nevis Island administration has asked NEVLEC to revisit this matter once global fuel prices stabilize. And that statement comes from the Nevis Island administration, Ministry of Finance. You're listening to The Week in Review, a recap of the stories which shaped the nation last week. During a sitting of the National Assembly on Thursday, Minister responsible for Public Infrastructure, Energy and Utilities, Honorable Conwys Maynard, moved the second reading of the Financial Services Regulatory Commission Amendment Bill 2026, the Gaming Control Amendment Bill 2026, and the Anti-Proliferation Financing of Weapons of Mass Destruction Amendment Bill 2026. Minister Maynard also moved the second reading of the Virtual Asset Amendment Bill 2026 and the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2026. All five bills had their first reading on June 11, 2026. The National Assembly was carried live on ZIZ Radio 96.1 FM and participating radio stations. It was also viewed live on TV Channel 5 in St. Kitts and Channel 98 in Nevis, and streamed live at www.zizonline.com. Copies of the bill can be found on the website of the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service under the section titled Bills. The bills can also be accessed via the Facebook page St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service. In other National Assembly developments, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis on June 18 successfully passed a comprehensive suite of legislation in the National Assembly aimed at further strengthening the Federation's financial sector and reinforcing its standing as a respected and reputable member of the global community. The five bills approved were the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, the Gaming Control Amendment Bill, the Anti-Proliferation Bill, the Virtual Asset Bill, and the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Bill 2026. The suite of legislation was piloted through the House by the Minister of Public Infrastructure, Energy and Utilities, Domestic Transport, Information, Communication and Technology and Posts, Honorable Conwys Maynard. Maynard was supported by his fellow members of Parliament. In presenting the bills, Minister Maynard underscored the government's unwavering commitment to safeguarding the integrity, stability, and international credibility of the Federation's financial system. He emphasized that the measures adopted by Parliament are critical to preserving the country's reputation, maintaining confidence among international partners and investors, and ensuring continued access to global financial markets. Minister Maynard noted that the amendments align St. Kitts and Nevis with evolving international standards and best practices in financial regulation, anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing, while strengthening oversight mechanisms across key sectors of the economy. The passage of these key pieces of legislation reflects the government's proactive approach to addressing emerging global risks and demonstrates the commitment to transparency, accountability, and robust regulatory governance. It also reinforces St. Kitts and Nevis' determination to remain a competitive, secure, and well-regulated international financial center. This is the Week in Review. The water supply to St. Peter's community is expected to be significantly boosted in the coming days as the Water Services Department carries out testing of a new pipeline and pump that will deliver an additional 150,000 gallons per day. On Tuesday, June 16, Water Engineer Cromwell Williams gave an update of current projects being undertaken by the Water Services Department. He said that the excess water being pumped into the Bastia aquifer from the Bastia desalination plant, commissioned in late February this year, will allow water to be diverted to other areas. In the case of St. Peter's, this required additional infrastructure. When the testing phase is complete, the water engineer said that the additional 150,000 gallons that will supplement the St. Peter's water sources will enable St. Peter's to achieve 24/7 water services for residents. In other news, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Honorable Dr. Terence Dew, has called for people-centered climate action and stronger international cooperation to address the growing threat of sea level rise, warning that for small island developing states such as St. Kitts and Nevis, the crisis is no longer a future concern but a present-day reality. Prime Minister Dew made the remarks while participating in a high-level panel discussion on protecting rights in the face of sea level rise during the Berlin Climate Mobility Forum hosted by the Global Center for Climate Mobility in collaboration with the Robert Bosch Stiftung. Joining international leaders, policymakers, climate experts and development partners, Dr. Dew highlighted the profound impact that rising sea levels are already having on communities, economies, livelihoods and cultural heritage across St. Kitts and Nevis. The Prime Minister explained that coastal erosion, coral reef degradation, stronger storm surges and the loss of historically significant sites are no longer theoretical risks but active challenges confronting the Federation. He noted that these impacts extend beyond environmental concerns and increasingly threaten fundamental human rights. Prime Minister Dew emphasized that protecting people must remain at the center of global climate policy and that resilience-building efforts must be designed to safeguard communities while preserving dignity, culture, and opportunity. The Prime Minister also used the opportunity to showcase the Federation's Sustainable Island State Agenda, which places climate resilience, environmental sustainability, and community empowerment at the core of national development. He noted that St. Kitts and Nevis has been actively pursuing policies and partnerships aimed at strengthening coastal protection, supporting vulnerable communities, and enhancing long-term sustainability. Dr. Dew highlighted the valuable partnership between St. Kitts and Nevis and the Global Center for Climate Mobility, describing it as an example of how international cooperation can deliver practical, locally driven solutions. He pointed to initiatives such as the Community's Climate Adaptation Facility, which supports community-led adaptation efforts and provides critical financing and policy support for vulnerable populations. The Prime Minister further stressed that climate adaptation strategies must be informed by the people most directly affected by climate change. He noted that successful responses require collaboration among governments, communities, development partners, and civil society to ensure that solutions reflect local realities and experiences. As St. Kitts and Nevis continues to champion climate action on the global stage, Prime Minister Dew reaffirmed the Federation's commitment to working with international partners to protect the rights, livelihoods, and futures of vulnerable populations. Meantime, while in Berlin, Dr. Dew joined fellow heads of state and government from across the globe on June 18 at the opening of the Berlin Climate Mobility Forum, where he delivered a compelling call for climate justice, meaningful partnerships, and greater inclusion of local communities in shaping climate solutions. Prime Minister Dew participated in the high-level exchange on the climate mobility principles alongside leaders from Palau, the Marshall Islands, Honduras, Tuvalu, and the Maldives. The session was convened by the Global Center for Climate Mobility in collaboration with the Robert Bosch Stiftung and focused on advancing global consensus around climate mobility and adaptation. Addressing an audience of international policymakers, development partners, climate experts, and civil society representatives, Prime Minister Dew emphasized that climate change is fundamentally a matter of justice, particularly for small island developing states that contribute minimally to global emissions yet bear some of the most severe consequences. using the example of a Caribbean fisherman whose livelihood is increasingly threatened by rising sea temperatures and changing marine ecosystems. Dr. Drew highlighted the disproportionate burden being carried by vulnerable nations. Dr. Drew also highlighted the ongoing collaboration between the Global Center for Climate Mobility and local stakeholders in Nevis as an example of how global partnerships can successfully support community-led adaptation efforts. He noted that climate financing must be better aligned with local needs and priorities to ensure that vulnerable communities are empowered rather than displaced by climate challenges. And that item brings us to the end of the week in review. Recapping the top stories: St. Kitts and Nevis government pushes ahead with national addressing system. Nevis Island Administration Ministry of Finance issues statement on fuel charge adjustment. 5 bills received their second reading in the National Assembly on Thursday. Suite of legislation passed in the National Assembly. St. Peter's to be restored to 24/7 water supply following key upgrades. Dr. Drew calls for climate justice and community-led solutions at Climate Mobility Forum in Germany. And TDC invests in leadership development. Those are some of the stories which made news last week in the Federation. Thanking you very much for joining us this week for the Week in Review. I'm Michael Berridge. Do have a safe and productive week ahead.